Like perhaps many of you, I can still remember the first image of architecture that really spoke to me. It was a lone house set against a desert landscape at dusk. The building materials seemed so authentic to their surroundings, yet the sleek, modern form of the house starkly contrasted the organic silhouettes of the surrounding landscape. Whatever building this was, whatever space it occupied, I was enamored with them both. I began immediately to devise a plan to ensure that I, too, could one day create, and by extension occupy, such space myself. The next year, I was admitted to architecture school. Experts estimate that the average American consumes upwards of 4,000 images every single day. These take the form of advertisements, news clips, social media posts, movies and TV shows, personal documentation, etc., etc., etc. The modern proliferation of imagery is not only unmatched in volume by any other point in human history, but as John Berger argues, its nature is also completely unrecognizable from the historical circulation and consumption of images. Image viewing, just a few hundred years ago something the average person may have done just a handful of times each year, is now a ritual as constant as pulling a cell phone from one's pocket, as passing a billboard while driving home, as flipping through channels before dozing to sleep. Something once anticipated, celebrated, analyzed, and enjoyed is now hardly even consented to. We're in an era of ubiquitous image inundation. Since the introduction of the camera as an image-making tool, and alongside remarkable advancements in image-making technology, the distinction between what is real and what is imaged has started to blur. I am arguing that image content, but more specifically imaged space, is not real. This is for two reasons. First, the act of translating a temporal, three-dimensional space onto a two-dimensional plane is an inherent falsification of that space. I mean this geometrically. There is not a lens in the world nearly as sophisticated as the human eye, and there is not a way to use a lens that truly duplicates the function of the eye. We can view imaged space and perhaps sometimes gain a general understanding of the scale or layout of the space, but that understanding is never the same one we would gain by occupying the space. The imaged space, as it is understood by the viewer, is a completely different space than the one that was actually imaged. The second reason imaged space is not real is because the way we interact with space in practice is never the way we imagine ourselves interacting with space in theory. When you look at an image of a space, whether consciously or not, you imagine yourself as occupying that space from the same perspective as the camera. Often, you imagine yourself intimately aware of the imaged space, in a way that we are rarely aware of occupied space. You imagine yourself free from distractions and underlying stressors, focused only on occupying the space in question. But this is not a state that most of us ever truly exist in. To occupy space is to be subject to the constant impositions of ruling organizational systems. For those of us here, that would be modern capitalism, the social hierarchy dictated by modern capitalism, and late-stage democracy. Under typical conditions, I would argue it is rare for anyone subjected to these systems to occupy space without their immediate, emotional, physiological experience being altered by their subjugation to these systems. Imaged spaces do not exist, but nevertheless they abound. We see space used to contextualize the subject matter of advertisements, political propaganda, and photos of friends and strangers alike. Constantly. By our observation of imaged space, we construct an understanding of lived existence as it relates to the context of images. Images of space are proof of concept to their viewer of the soundness of current organizational systems to which we are subjected. To view the image of a space that one considers beautiful or peaceful or seductive is a promise to the viewer that such a space exists, and often that such a space is available to them as well if they continue to comply with current systems. Beatrice Colomina and Mark Wigley once wrote that good design is an anesthetic. Subjectivity aside, what I've understood this popular phrase to mean is that well-designed objects and spaces work to buffer their users from the inherent harshness of human existence. That ease of use and ease of occupancy make life a little more bearable for everyday people. Good design may very well be an anesthetic, but I would argue that under the conditions of the current organizational systems of capitalism, its subsequent social hierarchy, and late-stage democracy, good design is not something most people truly experience. Good design is something that requires an exchange of discretionary capital. I would argue it's something most people cannot afford to own themselves. And while public space seems often to act as the site of philanthropic design projects that may often qualify as good design,
It is rare for most people to genuinely experience these spaces because of the unrelenting distractions of dominant organizational systems as I've previously described. Perhaps on occasion good design does act as an anesthetic, but today I would argue it is more often true that design imagery is an anesthetic. So long as images are created, distributed, and consumed without criticism of their composition or situation, they will continue to act as agents of maintenance to the status quo. Image viewing will continue to coax image viewers into subservience to the systems of organization which rely upon their exploitation. The most effective images in question all feign banality. The spaces imaged are seemingly ordinary. Kitchen tables, bedroom floors, suburban driveways. These spaces are generally familiar to the image viewer, further reinforcing the idea that the imaged space is real and possible for them, too. But nothing is banal about the types of image space most successfully and popularly distributed. It is the myth of banality inherent to them which makes them so enticing. Perhaps a mediation to this pervasive and dangerous trend of media distribution is a reimagination of banal space, a reimaging. Perhaps the omission of an obvious subject, an obvious narrative in the creation of image allows for slightly more transparency, slightly more honesty as to the space imaged. Perhaps to shift our focus to banal space, space subject to the inequity of capitalism, the prejudice of social hierarchy, the criminality of late-stage democracy. Perhaps focusing on known and lived and real occupied space, we might become more aware of the functions of spatial imagery. In imaging banal space, we might realize a beauty otherwise overshadowed by that promised by image space. Perhaps we might better understand, better criticize the function of imaged space as it is popularly published. Raoul Wallenberg managed to save the lives of tens of thousands of Hungarian Jews by instigating a social reorganization that resulted in their political reclassification as potential immigrants protected by Swedish status. Aside from being a remarkable and successful humanitarian effort, this reorganization calls into question what is possible when organizational systems that go awry are resisted and reimagined to the benefit of those most vulnerable. By reconsidering the nature of spatial imagery and revising its most popular functions, image and space alike may be relieved of their complacence in the inequitable systems that govern human behavior and used instead to reimagine what more beautiful, more equitable existence is possible.